The stars had never looked so cold. Elias drifted in and out of consciousness as alarms screamed inside the shattered cockpit. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Warning lights flashed red across every panel. The shuttle, his only link to home, was tearing itself apart. Stabilizers offline. Oxygen low, the mechanical voice repeated, fading in and out like a broken lullaby. Elias tried to breathe, but the air smelled of smoke and burning metal. His chest heaved, lungs aching as gravity yanked the shuttle downward. Through the cracked viewport he saw it, an endless white desert stretching beneath him. Snowstorms swirled like hungry ghosts, waiting to devour him whole. The last thing he remembered was the sickening crunch of metal against ice. Then darkness. When he woke, silence filled the world. His head throbbed. His suit's visor was half fogged with his own breath. Somehow he was alive. He pushed debris off his chest, coughing, groaning, forcing his stiff body to move. The cabin was destroyed. Panels ripped open, wires dangling like veins. His hands trembled as he reached for the survival kit wedged under a collapsed seat. Food rations, a heat pack, a thermal sleeping bag. Not much, but better than nothing. Outside, the wind howled. He stumbled through the wreckage, stepping into the snow. The cold hit him like knives. Every breath froze in his throat. The sky above was bruised gray, no sun, only storm. He whispered to himself just to hear a human voice. "Keep moving, Elias, don't stop. Don't freeze." The landscape stretched forever, empty and cruel. He searched for shelter, any cave, any ridge, but found only broken white plains. His body was already slowing, legs heavy, vision dimming. That's when he saw her. At first he thought it was a hallucination. A small figure collapsed in the snow, glowing faintly like a shard of fallen starlight. Her skin shimmered with a pale blue light, pulsing weakly as if life itself was flickering inside her. Elias staggered closer. His survival instinct screamed, "Ignore it, conserve your strength." But something deeper pulled him forward, the human instinct to reach out, to help. The figure was a girl. Not human. Her features were delicate, strange, yet hauntingly beautiful. Her eyes, half closed, had vertical pupils like liquid silver. Her clothes were torn, her body trembling violently against the cold. She looked fragile, dying. Elias dropped to his knees beside her. Hey, stay with me." His voice cracked in the icy wind. She flinched at the sound, eyes snapping open, fear flashing in their alien depths. She tried to crawl away, but she was too weak. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Two strangers, two species, both broken, both lost. Elias's breath fogged as he hesitated. She wasn't human. She might be dangerous, but she was also freezing. Just like him. The storm roared louder, snow swirling around them like a shroud. Elias pulled the sleeping bag from his kit, spreading it open with shaking hands. He gestured to her, pointing, trying to make her understand. She shook her head, whispering something in a language he couldn't understand. Her voice was soft, trembling, full of mistrust. "I don't know what you're saying," Elias murmured. "But if we don't share this, we die." He extended his hand, palm up, showing he had nothing to harm her. For a long, painful moment, she didn't move. The snow piled against her body, burying her glow. Then slowly, with trembling hesitation, she reached out. Their hands touched. Cold against cold, fragile against fragile. Elias guided her into the sleeping bag with him. It was cramped, almost unbearable, their bodies pressed together for warmth. He could feel her strange heartbeat against his chest, faster than his own. She stiffened at the closeness, eyes wide, but the warmth began to spread. Her shivering slowed. Outside, the storm screamed and clawed at the broken shuttle. Inside, two survivors, human and alien, breathed together, trapped in the same fragile cocoon of heat. Elias whispered almost to himself, "We'll make it through the night somehow." The alien girl didn't reply, but she didn't pull away either. And in that moment, surrounded by a world of ice and death, something fragile and unexpected was born. The spark of trust. The storm did not ease. All night it clawed at the wreckage, rattling broken metal like the bones of a dying beast. Inside the cramped cocoon of the sleeping bag, Elias could hear nothing but the howling wind, the hammer of his own heartbeat, and the strange, uneven rhythm of the alien girl breathing beside him. It was awkward, uncomfortable, almost unbearable, and yet it was life. Without her body heat, he would have frozen to death. Without his, she would have too. Elias lay stiffly, staring at the flickering shadows above, afraid to move. He could feel every twitch of her muscles, every tiny shiver. Her skin was smooth and strangely cool at first, but it carried a faint inner warmth like holding a stone that had been sitting in sunlight. At one point she stirred, her silver eyes opening just inches from his face. They glowed faintly in the dark, studying him like he was the alien. For a long, tense moment, neither of them spoke. Their breaths mingled in the small space, visible clouds rising and vanishing in the cold air. Finally, she whispered something, a string of soft syllables that meant nothing to him but carried fear and caution. "I don't understand you," Elias whispered back. His voice was rough, low. He held up his hand slowly, showing empty palms. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't move. Her gaze flicked down to the survival knife strapped to his thigh, and her body tensed. Elias noticed, unbuckled it, and carefully slid the weapon away, pushing it into the far corner of the wreckage. Her breathing slowed just slightly. Still, trust was fragile, thinner than the walls shielding them from the storm. Hours passed. The storm raged on. At some point, exhaustion dragged Elias into a shallow sleep. When he stirred awake, he felt something strange. Her hand resting lightly against his chest as if testing the beat of his heart. The moment she saw his eyes open, she jerked her hand back, embarrassed or maybe afraid she'd been caught. Elias said nothing. He only gave a small nod, a silent agreement that he understood. His heart, steady and human, had told her what words could not, that he was alive, fragile, mortal, just like her. By morning, if it could even be called morning since the sky was the same gray storm, Elias knew they had to make a choice. Staying inside the wreckage forever wasn't possible. Supplies were limited, but first he had to try to communicate. He tore a piece of metal plating free from the floor and used a bit of soot to draw a crude circle. "Planet," he said, pointing down. Then he drew a smaller circle above it. "Ship." He tapped his chest. "Elias." She watched closely, tilting her head. After a pause, she touched the soot-stained plate and drew a spiral, intricate, curling like a seashell. Then she pointed to herself and spoke one word. "Lyra." The sound of it lingered in the air, soft, musical. Elias repeated it carefully. "Lyra." Her eyes widened slightly at hearing her name from his mouth. For the first time, her expression softened. Not much, but enough that Elias saw the faintest shadow of a smile. But the fragile peace didn't last. Lyra began to shiver again. The sleeping bag wasn't enough for two against the endless storm. Elias could see her glow fading, her lips turning a deeper shade of blue. He cursed under his breath, fumbling for the last heat pack in his kit. Cracking it open, he pressed it against her hands, holding them gently between his own. Her eyes widened at the sudden warmth. She looked at him, confusion and wonder mixing across her face. Then, after a long pause, she whispered a word, not in her tongue but broken, hesitant in his. "Thank you." The sound almost broke him. He hadn't heard gratitude in days, hadn't even believed another voice besides his own would ever speak to him again. And now here she was, an alien girl wrapped against him in the ruins of his ship, using his language to bridge the gulf between their worlds. Elias gave a small, tired laugh. "You're welcome." That night, as the storm battered the wreckage and the world outside howled for their deaths, something subtle shifted. They were no longer just two bodies sharing heat out of desperation. They were two souls reaching across fear, reaching across silence. The fragile spark of trust had become the first fragile thread of connection, and Elias knew, whatever happened next, neither of them would face it alone. The storm lasted 2 full nights. Inside the ruined shuttle, Elias and Lyra huddled in their fragile cocoon, the sleeping bag their only fortress against the void of ice. But warmth alone could not silence the fear clawing at them. Fear of the cold, fear of hunger, fear of each other. Every time their skin touched, Elias felt her tense, like a cornered animal deciding whether to flee or strike. Her breathing was quick, nervous, her silver eyes flicking to every small movement he made. Elias understood. If their places were reversed, he would have been the same. Humans told stories of alien threats, of unknown dangers in the void. Maybe her people told the same stories about him. He tried to ignore the weight of her mistrust, tried to close his eyes and rest. But in the silence between the howls of the wind, his own memories stirred. He remembered Earth. He remembered a hospital room, too bright, too cold. His sister lying weak and pale, her tiny hand clutching his. He had promised her he'd see the stars one day for both of them. She had smiled, thin and tired, and whispered, "Don't forget me." That was the last time he saw her alive. Now, lying beside Lyra in the wreck of his ship, Elias felt the same protective instinct rising in him. She was fragile, vulnerable, yet clinging to life with stubborn strength. Something inside him whispered that if he let her die, it would be like losing his sister all over again. He shifted slightly, trying to make space in the cramped sleeping bag. Lyra's glow pulsed faintly against his chest, weaker than before. She watched him carefully and then, hesitant, awkward, she pressed closer. At first Elias froze. Then he realized what she was doing. She was syncing her breathing with his, matching his rhythm. Slowly, her shivering eased. Her strange heartbeat, so fast at first, began to calm against his ribs. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was trust, fragile and real. But trust was not the same as safety. On the third night, Elias woke to the sound of movement. Not the storm. Something else. A faint scuttling, like claws scraping across metal. His hand twitched toward the corner where he'd left the knife. Lyra stirred, eyes glowing faintly. She had heard it too. Her body stiffened against him, every muscle taut. The noise came again, closer this time. Elias held his breath, straining to hear. Then a thump. Something heavy brushing against the wreckage walls. He gritted his teeth. Predators. He should have known a world this harsh would breed hunters. And here they were, two warm, fragile creatures glowing like a beacon in the snow. Lyra clutched his arm suddenly, her nails sharp against his skin. Her face was close to his ear, her voice a trembling whisper in her language, warning, pleading. Elias whispered back, I know. He reached slowly, carefully for the knife. His heart thundered in his chest. The scraping sound circled the wreck, cautious but insistent. Something large, something hungry. Minutes passed, but the creature never forced its way inside. Perhaps the storm distracted it. Perhaps their silence saved them. At last the noises faded into the wind. But the danger left its mark. When Elias lay back down, he found Lyra's hand gripping his shirt so tightly the fabric strained. She didn't let go even after the sounds were gone, even after the storm lulled. Her glowing eyes stayed open, fixed on him, as if he were the only shield she had left. And Elias, staring back into those strange alien depths, made a silent vow. He would not let anything take her. Not the cold, not hunger, not the predators outside. Later, when sleep finally dragged him under, he dreamed of Earth again. But this time his sister wasn't alone in the hospital bed. Beside her was Lyra, glowing faintly in the dark, reaching out her hand. Elias woke with his heart aching, torn between memory and the fragile reality pressed against him. Fear was still there, but so was something else. Something growing. By the fourth day, hunger became the loudest sound in the wreck. Elias had rationed carefully, breaking each nutrient bar into tiny halves, chewing them slowly to trick his stomach. But even with discipline, the supplies were almost gone. His ribs ached from emptiness, and every movement drained what little strength he had left. Lyra fared no better. She had eaten even less, nibbling at the strange food with a pained grimace, then shaking her head. It wasn't sustaining her. Her glow, once steady, now flickered like a candle struggling against wind. Elias sat slumped against the wall, staring at the last ration pack. He wanted to save it, to split it later, but Lyra's shivering grew worse by the hour. She hugged her knees to her chest, her silver eyes dim with exhaustion. He sighed, picked up the bar, and pressed it gently into her hands. She shook her head, pushing it back toward him. You need it more, Elias whispered. His voice was hoarse. He curled her fingers around the bar and nudged it closer to her chest. Please, don't argue. For a long moment she resisted, her expression unreadable. Then reluctantly she brought it to her lips and ate. Her eyes flicked up to him. Guilt, gratitude, and something deeper all tangled together. Elias leaned back, trying to ignore the hollow ache inside him. If giving her his last food meant she'd survive a little longer, then so be it. But survival couldn't run on sacrifice alone. That evening, Lyra stirred from her half-sleep and spoke in her soft musical tongue. Elias frowned, shaking his head. I don't understand. She grew frustrated, gesturing wildly toward the snowy horizon, then toward herself. Finally, she crouched down and scratched into the frost on the metal floor. A jagged shape, crystalline, glowing faintly as if even the memory of it carried light. Elias blinked. You eat that? She nodded fiercely, miming chewing. Then she touched her chest, her glow pulsing stronger as if to show what it did for her. Crystals. Her food wasn't what he carried in the kit. It was out there, buried in the ice. Elias hesitated. Leaving the wreck in a storm was suicide. But if he didn't, she'd fade to nothing. And if she faded, he'd be alone. He couldn't let that happen. The next morning, bundled in every scrap of fabric he could salvage, Elias helped Lyra to her feet. She leaned heavily on him, her body fragile as glass. Together, they staggered out into the white wilderness. The wind clawed at their faces, snow blinding, freezing needles biting into every crack of skin. Elias wrapped an arm around her waist, half dragging, half guiding her across the frozen plain. After what felt like hours, she pointed toward a ridge of ice glowing faintly from within. An entrance, an ice cave. Inside, the storm's scream faded to a muffled whisper. The walls shimmered with veins of crystal, glowing softly in colors Elias had no name for. Violet, cyan, gold. They pulsed faintly, alive with some alien energy. Lyra's eyes lit up. With trembling hands, she broke a shard free and pressed it to her lips. As she swallowed, her glow surged brighter, color flooding back into her face. Her breathing steadied. Elias watched, stunned, as life returned to her like a flame reigniting. She broke another crystal free and held it out to him. He shook his head, smiling faintly. Not my kind of dinner. She tilted her head, studying him. Then she set the crystal down and instead reached for his hand. Her fingers wrapped around his with surprising strength. She squeezed once, firm, certain. For the first time since the crash, Elias felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was hope. When they returned to the wreck, the storm was still raging, but the cold felt less suffocating. Lyra's glow illuminated the shadows, casting warm light across the broken walls. Elias sank down beside her, exhausted, starving, but lighter than before. She sat close, her glow brushing against his arm. They had found food for her, yes. But more than that, they had found something Elias hadn't dared believe in since the crash. A reason to keep fighting. For her, for them, for tomorrow. The storms came and went in endless waves, like the planet itself was breathing. Inside the shattered shuttle, Elias and Lyra built a fragile rhythm of survival. He kept the shelter intact. She gathered crystals when the weather allowed. They returned each night to the cramped cocoon of the sleeping bag, their breath mingling in the frozen dark. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Silence pressed heavier than hunger. Fear lingered between them like a wall. If they were truly to live, not just endure, they needed more than heat. They needed to understand each other. One evening, after the storm died down, Elias sat with a scrap of metal plate in his lap and a chunk of soot in his fingers. The fireless cold left no room for waste, but he needed something to speak across the gulf of their languages. He drew a rough circle. Then he sketched waves across it. Earth, he said. He tapped his chest. My home. Lyra tilted her head, silver eyes studying the shapes. After a long pause, she crouched beside him and drew her own circle. But hers wasn't blank, it was covered in spirals, curling patterns like seashells nested together. She touched her chest. Luma! Luma! Elias repeated carefully. Her glow brightened faintly at hearing him say it. He added a second sketch, tall lines like towers. City, he explained, pointing upward. He closed his eyes, remembering. Lights everywhere, cars, music in the streets. Lyra frowned in confusion, but when he hummed a short melody, something clumsy and broken from memory, her face softened. She placed her hand on her throat and made a sound too, but not words. A tone, clear, pure. It shimmered in the wreck like crystal glass ringing. Elias's breath caught. She was showing him her world. Her voice wasn't just sound. It vibrated, carried light within her skin. He watched, entranced as patterns of faint glow rippled across her arms with each note. Her people had sung their lives into the air. Slowly, carefully, they exchanged fragments of their pasts. Elias spoke of oceans, vast blue waters stretching forever, waves crashing in rhythm. He drew a crude fish, laughed at his own clumsy attempt, then mimed swimming with his arms. Lyra's eyes widened, and she drew her own wave patterns, echoing his gesture. He spoke of sunsets, how the sky burned orange and purple, how it sank into the sea. He lifted his hands to show the sun falling. Lyra touched his chest gently, as if to feel the warmth of the memory. In turn, she showed him visions of her world through drawings and gestures. She sketched glowing fields, light woven into the ground itself, pulsing with every step of her people. She mimed groups raising their arms together, voices blending into harmony, a community bound not by walls but by song. Her glow brightened as she shared, casting colors across the wreck, painting the cold metal with fleeting beauty. Elias watched, spellbound. Despite different worlds, their stories held echoes of each other: beauty, wonder, loss. He saw the grief hidden in her eyes when she touched the spiral of Luma and let her hand fall, her glow dimming. Her home was gone. War, destruction. He didn't understand the words, but he felt the sorrow. Without thinking, Elias reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. That night, silence wasn't empty. It was warm, filled with the echo of shared memories. As they lay side by side, Elias found himself whispering. Not to teach, not to survive, but simply to connect. He told her about laughter, how it bubbled up unplanned, how it felt like sunlight inside the chest. He tried to laugh, weak and awkward. Lyra stared at him, confused, then suddenly mimicked the sound, a clumsy echo. Her version was strange, high-pitched but real, and for the first time since the crash, Elias laughed for real. The sound startled both of them. Then Lyra joined, her voice ringing like glass and light. In the middle of a frozen wasteland, inside a wrecked shuttle, human laughter and alien song tangled together, weaving something fragile and alive. By the time sleep pulled at his eyes, Elias knew this was no longer just survival. This was something more. Two lost souls, two broken worlds, beginning to build something new out of silence, song, and the stubborn refusal to give up. The storm had finally broken. For the first time in days, the sky above the frozen world cleared, revealing sharp stars glittering like ice shards. The silence was eerie, too deep, too absolute, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Elias and Lyra sat just inside the wreck, huddled together in the weak glow of her body. Hunger gnawed at him. Exhaustion weighed heavy, but something about the stillness unsettled him more than any storm. Too quiet, he murmured. Lyra tilted her head, sensing it too. Her glow pulsed faintly, uncertain, like the flicker of a candle. It happened at night. Elias woke to a faint scratching sound. At first he thought it was ice shifting. Then it came again, closer, heavier. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. He sat up carefully, reaching for the survival knife by his side. Lyra was already awake, her silver eyes wide, fixed on the wall of the wreck. She pressed a trembling finger to her lips. Silence. The scratching grew louder, circling the broken shuttle like a predator sniffing prey. Then came a low, guttural growl, deep enough to vibrate the floor beneath them. Elias's grip on the knife tightened. His heart thundered. The sound moved to the entrance. Something massive shoved against the twisted metal, rattling it violently. Snow spilled in through the cracks. Lyra clutched his arm, her nails sharp against his sleeve. Her glow brightened with fear, as though her very body betrayed her hiding place. Elias whispered, barely audible, "Stay behind me." The wall bent inward with a screech of metal. For one terrifying heartbeat, Elias thought it would tear through. He crouched low, knife ready, every muscle screaming to fight despite his weakness. Then silence again. The predator circled, growling, claws scratching, testing. The sound of heavy breathing, wet and hungry, filled the night. Elias's mouth went dry. He imagined rows of teeth, eyes glowing in the dark. Minutes stretched into an eternity. At last the growls faded. The scratching drifted away, swallowed by the snow. Elias collapsed back against the wall, chest heaving. His arm shook so badly he nearly dropped the knife. Lyra's hand remained tight on his sleeve. Even when the danger had passed, she didn't release him. Her glowing eyes were still wide, locked on his face. He realized then she wasn't just afraid of the creature. She was afraid of losing him. Something inside Elias shifted at that thought. But the danger wasn't gone. The next night, the predator returned. This time it didn't circle. It attacked. The wall of the shuttle groaned as claws tore into it. Snow and shards of metal rained down. Elias lunged forward, stabbing through the gap with his knife. A roar erupted, shaking the wreck. The beast yanked back, dragging the knife halfway out of his hand. Pain lanced through his arm. Lyra gasped, pressing against the far wall. Then something changed. Her glow surged brighter, flooding the wreck with blue-white light. Her body trembled, not with fear, but with something powerful, dangerous. She raised her hands, and arcs of electricity snapped between her fingers, crackling through the air. Elias froze, stunned. He hadn't known. She had hidden this, kept it secret. With a cry that echoed like song, Lyra thrust her hands forward. A surge of bioelectric energy shot through the gap in the wall. The air cracked. The creature screamed, a horrible, guttural sound, and stumbled back into the snow. For a moment, the wreck shook with the force of her power. Then silence returned. Elias stared at her, chest heaving. Her glow dimmed again, her body collapsing from the effort. He caught her before she hit the ground, holding her trembling frame against him. She looked up at him weakly, silver eyes searching his face. No words were spoken, but the truth was clear. She had revealed her secret because she trusted him. Because in that moment, survival wasn't just about her own life, it was about his too. Elias tightened his grip around her. "Thank you," he whispered, voice rough. "You saved us." Her glow flickered faintly like the smallest smile in light. Outside, the predator limped away, wounded but alive. The storm would return soon. The cold would never ease. But in that fragile, terrifying night, Elias understood something new. Lyra wasn't just his companion in survival. She was his ally, his equal, and maybe, just maybe, his hope. The predator never returned, but its attack left Elias shaken. Each night after, he woke at the smallest sound, knife in hand, heart pounding. Lyra, too, slept lightly, her glow flickering like a lantern that refused to go out. Their survival felt fragile, like glass balanced on the edge of breaking. Then on the 12th day, something changed. Elias was outside the wreck, scraping frost from a twisted panel, when a faint beep reached his ears. His heart jolted. He froze, listening. Beep, beep. He scrambled back inside, fumbling with the cracked console. A small light blinked weakly, a miracle. The emergency beacon had reactivated, its signal pulsing into the void. Rescue was possible. Elias laughed, half crazed with relief. "We're saved," he whispered, gripping the console with trembling hands. His throat tightened. "We're going home." Lyra tilted her head, watching him. She didn't share his smile. Her glow dimmed. Elias's joy faltered. The truth hit him like a blade. If a human ship came, what would they do when they saw her? To them, she wasn't Lyra, the girl who had sung light into the darkness, the girl who had saved his life. To them, she would be an unknown alien, a risk, maybe even a threat. Elias's relief twisted into dread. That night, the shuttle was silent. The storm had calmed, but inside, a storm brewed between them. Elias lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his chest tight. Lyra sat nearby, tracing spirals into the frost with her finger. Finally, she looked at him. Her silver eyes asked the question without words. "What happens when they arrive?" Elias sat up slowly. "If they see you..." He swallowed hard. "They might not understand. They might..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Lyra hugged her knees, her glow dim and low. For the first time, Elias saw fear not of the cold, not of predators, but of him, of his people. He crossed the small space and knelt in front of her. "Listen to me." His voice shook. "I won't let them hurt you. I swear it." Her eyes searched his, doubtful, trembling. He took her hands in his. "I don't care what they say. If you don't come, I don't come. Do you understand?" Her breath caught. For a moment, her glow flared brighter, softening her features. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead gently against his. It wasn't a kiss, not quite, but it was closer than anything words could reach. The next day, the sky split with light. A human rescue ship descended through the clouds, engines blazing against the frozen horizon. Elias and Lyra stood together at the mouth of the wreck, wind whipping around them. His chest surged with hope and terror all at once. The ship landed hard, snow swirling in its wake. Armed figures emerged, humans in survival suits, weapons raised cautiously as they scanned the wreckage. Elias stepped forward, raising his hands. "I'm alive!" he shouted over the wind. His voice cracked, desperate. "I'm here." The soldiers spotted him, their visors glinting. Relief surged through Elias's chest, until one of them pointed. At Lyra. Her glow betrayed her instantly. "Contact!" A soldier barked, raising his weapon. "No!" Elias roared, spreading his arms in front of her. "She's with me." The soldiers hesitated. Their guns stayed leveled. Elias's voice shook with fury and desperation. "If you fire, you'll hit me first. If she doesn't come, I stay behind. Do you hear me?" The commander stepped forward, visor reflecting the frozen landscape. His silence stretched like a blade over Elias's throat. Elias's heart pounded. He couldn't breathe. Lyra's hand gripped the back of his jacket, trembling. Then, slowly, the commander lowered his weapon. One by one, the others followed. Relief washed over Elias so fiercely his knees nearly buckled. He turned, meeting Lyra's silver eyes. For the first time, he saw something in them stronger than fear. Trust. As they walked toward the waiting ship together, hand in hand, Elias realized the truth. The hardest part wasn't surviving the crash, the storm, or the predators. The hardest part was choosing not to let go. The rescue ship's interior felt like another world. Warm air hissed from vents, wrapping Elias in comfort so strange he almost collapsed. After endless days of cold and hunger, the hum of engines and the sterile light of the medbay felt unreal. He was alive. Saved. But Lyra sat rigid beside him, her silver eyes darting around, her glow dim with unease. The humans surrounding them stared openly, whispering into comms, hands twitching near weapons. She didn't belong here, and she knew it. Elias squeezed her hand. "It's okay," he murmured. But the words were as much for himself as for her. The commander entered, helmet off, his face drawn tight. He looked at Elias first, relief in his eyes. Then his gaze shifted to Lyra, hard and assessing. "Report," he demanded. Elias swallowed. His voice was rough but steady. "Her name is Lyra. She's not a threat. She saved my life more than once. If not for her, I'd be dead." The commander's jaw tightened. "You understand the risk, Lieutenant. We don't know what she is, what diseases she carries, what her kind intends." Elias stepped in front of Lyra again, the same way he had on the frozen plain. His heart pounded, but his voice didn't waver. "I don't care. I won't leave her behind. If she doesn't come, I don't either." The room went still. Soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The commander studied Elias, measuring him, perhaps weighing the value of one man's loyalty against orders written far away. At last the commander exhaled and gave a small nod. "She comes under quarantine, but she comes." Relief hit Elias so hard his vision blurred. Lyra looked at him, confused, searching. He didn't have the words to explain, so he just held her hand tighter. They were safe, together. Days passed aboard the ship. Elias was treated for frostbite, malnutrition, exhaustion. His body healed quickly, but his thoughts lingered on Lyra. She remained in a clear-walled isolation room, not as a prisoner, but not free either. Scientists and medics studied her cautiously, asking questions she couldn't answer. She spent hours sitting quietly, tracing spirals in the condensation on the glass. Elias visited every day. At first, they could only touch palms against the barrier. But one evening, when the medics left, the door hissed open. Elias stepped inside, and for the first time since the ice world, they were alone again. Lyra rose to meet him. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the silence heavy with everything they couldn't yet say. Then she reached out hesitantly and pressed her glowing hand to his chest, right over his heart. Elias covered her hand with his own. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. The journey back to human space was long. Rumors spread through the crew. Some called Lyra dangerous, others a miracle. Elias ignored them. Each night he sat with her, teaching her words in his language. She learned quickly. "Water," she said one evening, pointing to the glass he held. "Star," she said another night, gazing out the viewport. And one evening, as they sat shoulder to shoulder, watching the galaxy drift by in silence, she turned to him and whispered a word so soft he almost missed it. "Home." Elias's throat tightened. He stared at her, struck silent. In that single word he heard everything. Her grief for the world she had lost, her courage in the face of fear, her choice to tie her future to his. He smiled, though his eyes burned. "Yes," he whispered back. "Home." Together they looked out into the endless stars. The future was uncertain. His people might never accept her. Her people might never return. But none of that mattered in that moment. Because against every storm, every predator, every wall of fear, two strangers had found each other. And sometimes Elias realized humanity's greatest story wasn't conquering the stars. It was daring to love across them.